Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Advanced RC Adventures. A2RC here. This is a channel where we investigate, explore, build, and explain, upgrade and advance Nitro RCs to another level. Come start another adventure with me. We're going to geek out together on bearings, and we're still following along with our Kyosho Mantis 2-wheel drive GP rebuild. This is a stock version. We're going to take apart a small portion of the front suspension today and take a look at the bushings that are in there for the axle, and we're going to replace them with some ball bearings. We're also going to discuss a lot of specifics about bearings, their ratings, their differences. You may have heard about the ABEC tolerances. It's an acronym for Annular Bearing Engineering Committee, which is put by the Anti-Friction Bearing Manufacturers Association, or better known as AFBMA. So let's go ahead and pick up the Kyosho. Let's take apart a small portion of the suspension and let's go from there. Let's take off this wheel here. You're going to notice a lot of similarities but a lot of differences. So this is just a standard plastic Kyosho wheel. These are pneumatic again. Nothing too spectacular or special important about it. Plastic wheel hexes, axle. Since these are rear wheel drive, there is no dog bone. There's nothing in there at all to drive the front wheels. Take off this plastic hex, little drive pin, and then let's go ahead and take off this steering knuckle so that we can get to the axle and the bearings. So slowly but surely we are going through this Mantis tear down and rebuild piece by piece. That transmission with that Kyosho blue gears in that last video was pretty interesting. Alright, so now that steering knuckle is off, let's go ahead and move the rest of the chassis out of the way and we'll just work with the steering knuckle. So here's the very simple axle. Uses a C-clip on the end there, just put into a groove. It's a 5mm shaft. Let's take a look inside here. So the transmission had brass bushings. The suspension, or the axles, use a Delrin or a nylon. And more than likely they did that for a little bit of either, like durability, or provide a slight amount of cushion to the axles instead of having the metal ride directly on those brass bushings. Now there's a number of different ways you can take these out. One of the simpler ways is just to get some kind of hex tool or something flat, maybe even a flathead screwdriver, and poke that down inside of there and just pop that bushing out. Go around to the other side, catch the lip. Careful you don't poke yourself. Back and forth, push that other bushing out. So as I mentioned, these use relatively standard size bushings, so let's go ahead and measure. If someone's not aware on how bearing sizes are written and you need to find some for yourself, here's how it works. It goes the ID, so the inner diameter is the first number, so that's a 5 mil. Then the outer diameter, that's a 10 mil. and then you measure the thickness. So these are a little undersized, but these are 4 millimeters. So we're looking for a 5 by 10 by 4 millimeter bearing. I like to use a lot these PTFE shielded bearings. PTFE is another name or acronym for Teflon. And we're going to talk about the different side shields. These kind of look like almost a tan carbon fiber kind of look. Let's go ahead and measure these. 5 by 10. And what's our thickness here? By 4. So we'll take our steering knuckle, and I noticed on the full upgraded one that the plastic itself provides a nice snug fit, but you can just push those in there. Sometimes I need to use that small arbor press you've seen in the other video or one of the shorts. In the back side here we might need to. We got our second bearing, and if you need a reach, grab a tool that makes sense and push that bearing down inside of there. So that's all that takes to replace those bearings. And then we'll take our axle, place that back inside, and then you would go ahead and rebuild that assembly with the pin and the plastic wheel hex. Take a look there in the back. Just that C-clip holding that axle on. Let's do a little bit of geeking out. I mentioned ABEC, so ABEC. That's again an acronym for Annular Bearing Engineering Committee. And that's the rating system. It's a number rating system for different types of bearings. ABEC 1 up to ABEC 9. ABEC 1 is the lowest rating, and up to ABEC 9, which is the highest rating. The tolerance refers to how closely the moving parts fit together. The higher the ABEC rating, the tighter the tolerance. ABEC ratings are what I mentioned. Nitro and Glow engines should use an ABEC 3 or better, try for 5, and wheel and transmission, etc. bearings should be ABEC 1 or better, try for an ABEC 3. Bearings themselves come in a lot of different shields. We have a couple examples here. These are all the same bearing size. Just for conversation, we're dealing with a 10 by 15 by 4. And so you might wonder why ball bearings are different sizes. As you increase the quantity of balls and size of the balls inside of the bearing, the load that the bearing can handle can increase. Notice that your front bearings on an engine might be physically smaller than a rear bearing, perhaps. That's because there's more load or force applied to that rear bearing from when the piston is being pushed down within that compression stroke. So with these bearings in front of us, we're going to talk about a couple different side shield options. So our first we can talk about is our rubber or plastic. This particular one has a black or rubber shield. Here's an example of the same type of thing, but it just uses red. And there's blue, and there's other colors as well. I would say blue, red, and black are the most common for plastic. And depending on the bearing type, the shield itself might be made out of pure plastic, but this particular one it's actually a piece of metal inside, and it's coated in a plastic film. So notice it keeps its shape. This particular bearing, you can see the balls inside. Let's look at this bearing. This particular bearing here is it's an ABAC 7. This is an ABAC 5. So these not only have a tighter tolerance on the balls and the race inside, but this actually has more balls than this one. Let's count them up real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 balls in here. And in this particular one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this one will be able to withstand a higher load or higher force because there's more balls for that load to distribute that force onto those races. So we have our black plastic, and this is a special type of Teflon or PTFE called polyamide, and we're going to discuss that as well. But the plastic or rubber, or maybe they're definitely outside of your standard metal shielded bearing. These two are your most common and least expensive. The rubber and plastic shields help with general maintenance. It provides a lot better seal than others to help keep the debris out and the lubrication inside. But most all of the plastic ones provide a little bit more rolling resistance compared to other shielded bearings. So we have this PTFE race bearing, and these side shields are pretty interesting because they're paper thin type of shields, and they're held in with a little spring clip inside of there. And you can use whatever tool you think appropriate, but this is a leather sewing needle that I have sharpened to a very fine point that I like to use. Let's go ahead and try to get that out of here. So you just catch the little edge and this little spring wire comes out. That's what helps to hold in lots of different types of shields, but these PTF shields in particular. Then you go in here with your pick and you get that shield out. Now, generally speaking, you don't have to mess with these much, but if you wanted to maintain these, you know, relubricate them, clean them, and put your shield back in, you are able to do that. This is another 12 ball bearing, 12 count ball bearing. So these polyamide seals, these are generally yellow in color to help distinguish what they are. They pop out in a similar way. So why do they offer different side shield options? We talked about all metal shielded, rubber shielding, PTFE, polyamide. PTFE shielded bearings are an excellent choice for all types of racers, and they offer a combination of high performance and low maintenance. They work really well for both on-road and off-road applications, and they have a very free spinning allowance when you compare it to, for example, the rubber shielded bearings. The best for free spinning are metal shields, PTFE, and polyamide compared to rubber. But metal shields provide the least amount of seal. Rubber and polyamide provide a secondary kind of good shield, and then your PTFE seal bearings is probably the least amount of sealability if you notice that wafer thin type of paper. But the affordability is very different also. These metal shielded bearings are the most affordable. Then taking a look at the rubber or plastic shielded bearings, these are also referred to as contact bearings. These are the next best affordable. Then we have our PTFE race bearings, gets a little bit more expensive. And then our polyamide is the most expensive. And in all of the shielding, we can have many different types of balls and races. We can have regular steel, chrome steel, stainless steel, and ceramic races, inner cages, and balls. So let's talk about ball specific ratings for a minute. Take a look at this pretty crusty engine bearing. By the way, if your bearings look like this in your engine, take them out, replace them. Even if you can clean them, you're never going to get all of the grime and grit out of the balls, and it's very probable that that grime and grit has already eaten away at the race or the balls to a degree. So it's time to replace them. This came out of an engine that was pre-owned to me and had probably sat for 10 or 15 years. There's no point in cleaning them. Just take them out, replace them. But it's a good example or illustration to talk about balls and ball grades. So you have stainless steel balls. You can have ceramic balls, chrome steel balls, and they're all good for different purposes. There's many different grades. The lowest grade is actually dubbed grade 1000, and it goes up to grade 3. The most common grades are somewhere between grade 200 and grade 24, but as those grades increase, your tolerances get better, but your price for the bearings increase to the point where a grade 200 bearing, and then you move up to a grade 24, 25, you're going to go up about 60%. And then if you go up to a grade 5, it's going to be another 90% on top of what you spent for the grade 24, 25 grade. And then if you go up to ceramic from grade 5, you're going to spend an additional 35% roughly. Anywhere from a standard bearing that might, cost $1, you may spend somewhere in the world of $15, $20, $25 on a single bearing that is ceramic. When you perform maintenance on your bearings, take your side shields off, spray them clean. There's even little devices that help you to hold them and clean them out. And there's a number of different options for lubrication. This is just one. It's a Dynamite brand, medium oil. I use this for electric motors on commutators as well as chassis ball bearings, etc. Take off your little applicator lid, put some oil inside, let that sit for a while, then rotate it, spin that in there, put your shield back on, and you're ready to go. Stainless steel balls generally aren't found in the RC hobby, but they are available. They do offer an increase of corrosion resistance, but the surface of the ball is not as hard as, for example, a chrome steel ball. And the grades of stainless are going to be, for example, 304 and 404. Then you go up one level to chrome steel. This is the most common within the RC hobby. They offer a hard coating, but it's susceptible to corrosion, and the base material is a little bit softer once you get below that hard chrome steel surface. Then let's talk about ceramics. Generally speaking, there's 4 different coatings that you refer to as ceramic, and I'm going to list them in order, the best to the worst, even though they're all very good. So silicon nitride has the most toughness. It's rated excellent, has very high temperature and thermal shock resistance, and the color of the balls are generally a black color. Then you have zirconia oxide. It's extremely strong and tough, but the color changes, and that color is like an off-white or even like a chalky white. Then going down to the next grade is silicon carbide. It's lightweight, high corrosion and heat resistance, and this is another black in color ball. And then lastly, there's alumina oxide, which is the most common ceramic bearing in the RC hobby, and that's another white in color. They all offer long life, low friction, high corrosion resistance, higher temperature resistance. They're all non-magnetic, and generally they're lighter weight than the chrome steel versions. And then lastly, let's talk about just a touch on engine bearings. So regardless of what the shield is, whether it's a metal shield, a rubber shield, or even a non-shielded bearing, they all need lubrication. This is interesting. This came out of an engine. It's a front bearing. Notice that both shields are still on. I personally would not do this, but I've seen a number of different manufacturers leave both shields on, and there's definitely some controversy on this, but I would say the large majority rule is that you leave that front shield on just to help keep the debris out, and you take off that back shield facing the inside of the engine so that it can have a little bit more lubrication. And then on your rear bearing, both shields are going to be off for proper lubrication. Bearings themselves come in all different sizes. Let's take a look here. Let's measure these both so you have a good frame of reference. 10 by 19 by 5. And this little guy here, 3 by 6 by 2.5. That's a pretty small bearing. They all have their different purposes, different uses. Here's one of these transmission bushings. They're the same size as those axle bushings, 5 by 10 by 4. So let's take a look at these side by side. Same size, different materials, put in different places of the car for different reasons. And then we have that upgraded PTFE race bearing inside of there, all ready to get reassembled. So I appreciate all you being here with me and taking the adventure. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you like anything Nitro, especially 10 scale touring cars, this is a place to be. So I appreciate you taking the adventure with me.